Look at what happened on that red carpet. Look at the images, look at the comment sections, because what took place on April 20th, 2026 at the Cibeles Palace in Madrid is one of those stories that operates on two levels simultaneously. And if you only read the headline, you missed the entire conversation underneath it. Let's start with the official story, because the official story is genuinely powerful, and it deserves its proper framing before we get into anything else. Aryna Sabalenka, the world's #1 tennis player, walked onto that stage at the Laureus World Sports Awards and accepted what is effectively the Oscar of athletic achievement. 4 titles in 2025, including the US Open, year-end #1 for the full 52-week calendar, the 5th WTA player in history to receive the Sportswoman of the Year award. She stood before the greatest collection of athletes assembled anywhere on the planet, and she shook. She literally shook on that stage, barely able to form words.
A champion overwhelmed by recognition, trembling on stage before legends. That's what earning your place at the highest level looks like, and Sabalenka had earned every tremor. But while she stood at that podium shaking, something unprecedented was unfolding simultaneously that the institutional machinery of sport couldn't accommodate because no category existed for it. A 20-year-old with no nomination, no award, no seat at the table had walked that same red carpet in a gown air-freighted from Manila, and within hours the entire women's professional tennis tour flooded her comment section. That woman is Alex Eala. And if you've been tracking what's been building since the Australian Open, none of this would surprise you. But if this is your entry point into her story, you need to grasp the full structural picture, because the chasm between what the numbers display and what's actually happening represents one of the most striking disconnects in professional tennis right now. Here's the reality she entered that Monday night in Madrid. Eala sits 44th in world rankings, holds 0 WTA titles, and entered the Mutua Madrid Open unseeded, meaning she faces Elise Mertens in round 2, a seeded opponent who defeated her in their last encounter. On paper, the ranking system positions her as solid but unremarkable mid-tier professional, the type who wins some, loses some, and generally operates beneath mainstream attention at non-Grand Slam events. But here's the data point that makes the ranking appear almost deliberately misleading. In the most recent WTA race standings, which resets every January and measures only current season performance at premier tournaments, Eala sits 10th, not 44th, 10th, accumulating 772 points. She's banking race points at top 10 pace, while the ranking system continues displaying a number from an entirely different conversation. And there's a structural explanation for this gap that matters tremendously. The regular WTA ranking operates on rolling 52-week cycles. So when Eala reached Miami Open semifinals in 2025, she banked significant points. But when she reached Miami's round of 16 in 2026 with another strong showing, she actually dropped 16 spots. Not for playing worse, but because her previous success expired from the ledger the moment her new result was added. The system penalized her for having excelled before, while the race had already registered what the ranking hadn't caught up to yet. These numbers exist simultaneously telling completely different stories about the same player. Not a crisis of talent, but a crisis of institutional measurement, exactly the context needed to understand what happened at Cibeles Palace. Because walking that carpet alongside her were Simone Biles, Lamine Yamal, Lando Norris, Rory McIlroy. The Laureus World Sports Awards aren't a tennis event, but sport's highest cross-disciplinary ceremony, where achievement from every athletic discipline shares the same stage, carpet and air. Tennis earns its place there only when a player accomplishes something the entire sports world recognizes across every boundary of code and competition. And in 2026, that player was Sabalenka, while Eala was invited as a guest. She had 1 week to decide what to wear, 7 days, and the decision executed across 2 continents reveals what this story is actually about. Approximately 1 week before the ceremony, Eala called her uncle Rhett Eala in the Philippines. Not a boutique operation or weekend project, but an established Filipino fashion designer with substantial portfolio. She wanted to wear Filipiniana to the red carpet, not strategically or because brand consultants suggested it was the moment, but because she'd carried this dream for years before anyone outside Manila knew her name. She said it herself afterward, quietly, almost parenthetically, in a post-match press conference. She'd always dreamed that if she were on a red carpet, she'd wear Filipiniana. That sentence wasn't delivered in speeches or announced on stages, but said by a player answering clay court tennis questions, who slipped it in almost in passing, like something personal finding its moment. Rhett designed the gown, sourced materials, produced and shipped internationally Manila to Madrid in days. A full beige chiffon gown with pleated tube silhouette paired with cropped pina fabric bolero bearing butterfly sleeves. The butterfly sleeve represents the architectural signature of the barong, the Philippine national formal costume, while the pina fabric isn't decorative detail selected for aesthetics but made from pineapple leaf fibers, one of Earth's most labor-intensive natural textiles requiring thousands of individual fiber extractions per meter. Producible only in the Philippines. Every thread in that bolero is irreducibly specifically Filipino, impossible to source elsewhere or replicate by any other hands in any other country on the planet. At an awards ceremony attended by elite athletes representing dozens of nations, Eala was the only person wearing her country's formal heritage costume while others wore designer gowns from European fashion houses. Eala wore the Philippines entirely. What happened after she posted the images shifts the story from personal to institutional. From one woman's dream to documented record of how an entire professional tour processes cultural presence. 6 active WTA professionals stopped mid-tournament week to comment on a single Instagram post. Not commentators or journalists or outside well-wishers, but ranked touring professionals with matches to prepare, schedules to manage, competitive pressures compressing every tournament day who stopped to write something. Coco Gauff, 2023 US Open champion currently ranked 4th worldwide, wrote one word: beautiful. Torium Penko, one of 2025's breakout names, wrote ridiculous in the only register where that functions as compliment. Katie Boulter, British #1, wrote absolutely stunning, while Eva Lees wrote she just passed away from this beauty. Eva Jovic wrote simply OMG, and Camila Osorio, Colombia's top-ranked player, left one Spanish word, hermosa. Read that list again. That's not a fan moment, but professional documentation of ranked competitors voluntarily pausing competitive weeks to engage with a colleague's cultural expression, requiring stopping, looking and finding something worth articulating publicly. No other WTA player at the Laureus ceremony generated that response. Not one. Tennis Channel, an American broadcast network whose primary business is Sabalenka and Djokovic and Grand Slams, published a dedicated standalone segment titled Alex Eala on walking the Laureus red carpet. Not a clip embedded in ceremony coverage or sidebar in larger pieces, but dedicated broadcast segment on a guest receiving no award, holding no nomination. The WTA's official social media separately amplified Eala's image, placing her in institutional streams alongside actual award winners, meaning a number 44 ranked player, not nominated, not seated at awards tables, was moving through official organizational channels alongside those who were. Something else belongs in this picture because it didn't begin April 20th. Institutional recognition of what Eala represents had already been publicly stated in Melbourne by someone who doesn't speak carelessly. On January 23, 2026, at an Australian Open press conference, Novak Djokovic was asked about court overcrowding, not about Eala specifically, but the situation had escalated beyond scheduling inconvenience, as her crowds became logistical phenomena at the Southern Hemisphere's biggest tennis event, with corridors filling beyond capacity, and courts unable to contain volumes of people trying to watch her play. Djokovic, with 24 Grand Slam titles and 5 Laureus Awards, having shared stages with every generational player of the modern era, addressed it directly, calling her the biggest tennis player ever from her country, which he acknowledged as big with significant interest, then called the crowd situation a very good problem, meaning institutions had to reorganize around her presence, meaning a 20-year-old was generating logistical challenges for the Australian Open that Djokovic thought worth flagging at press conferences. Nobody asked him to comment on that subject, yet 3 months later he co-hosted the ceremony where she walked in, generating coverage comparable to his hosting role, took photos with him, and Eileen Gu captioned, "Sandwiched between greatness," while his name was on marquees and hers dominated comment sections. Maribel Nadal, speaking as Deputy General Manager of the Rafa Nadal Academy, the institution that's been Eala's training home since age 13, stated it directly just days before the ceremony, telling media outlets that what Eala is doing is incredible, that the affection she receives worldwide is wonderful to witness, that she inspires boys and girls in the Philippines and represents an amazing, humble person. That statement preceded the dress arrival, red carpet, or anything that followed, meaning people closest to her competitive development had already registered what ranking systems had not. None of this, and this point requires clear statement, represents conflict with Sabalenka, whose Laureus presence was completely legitimate, having achieved the most dominant women's tennis season in 2025, by every measurable standard, earning sport's highest recognition for exactly that achievement. The tension doesn't exist between these women, but in the night structure, where official and viral stories ran separate tracks while both remained real, raising questions about where trajectories point from here, that require examining what the next several weeks actually mean structurally. Eala's second-round Madrid match against Mertens sits on April 24th schedule with Mertens as 19th seed, whose only prior meeting went her way, while Eala enters without protective seeding, meaning every round requires beating someone the system says she shouldn't beat, which also happens to be precisely what race numbers indicate she's been doing all year. But race points don't protect serves. Instagram comments don't break returns. Pina fabric becomes irrelevant on clay. And Stuttgart 3 weeks ago where she lost first round to Leylah Fernandez, 1646 stands as reminder that accumulated results aren't guaranteed outcomes, and that gaps between ranking statements and capabilities don't make individual matches easier. Here's the structural picture, making calendars significant beyond single tournaments. After Madrid comes Rome's Internazionale Biennale d'Italia, May 5th, 18th, where Eala has 0 points to defend, meaning every match adds net positive value. Every win lifts rankings without expiration problems that dropped her 16 spots in Miami, and 0 defensive points means no past success working against ledger entries. Rome precedes Roland Garros May 26th, June 8th, with 0 defensive points on Parisian clay as well. So if Madrid and Rome deliver deep runs, seeding calculations could place her inside top 35 before draws are made. Roland Garros, with its large Filipino and Asian diaspora attendance, crowd culture, and documented history of elevating cultural phenomena operating beyond scorelines, becomes the stage where conversations beginning at Cibeles Palace find next chapters. Because quarterfinal reaches in Paris don't just advance draws, but create conversations the entire sport cannot contain within match report boundaries. Race numbers were building toward exactly this moment before gowns were ever designed. So what Laureus Knight accomplished was placing formal frames around trajectories already in motion, making them visible to audiences extending far beyond tennis, ensuring that when matches arrive the world already understands story shapes. She's been 10th in race while ranked 44th worldwide, generating crowd situations Novak Djokovic flags at press conferences, drawing comment section responses from every relevant tour player, wearing national costumes to sport's highest ceremony, and leaving as secondary headlines at events built entirely for others. She's accomplished all this at 20 years old, trained since 13 at academies built by one of sport's greatest players, and said it herself after press conference wins, after answering clay court and tactical adjustment questions, almost as afterthought, her uncle delivered and she felt like a princess. That sentence wasn't declaration or speech, but a player mid-tournament week telling truth about private dreams finding public moments. And now the dress is gone, racket returns, dream sits on record, and clay season just started. Rankings say 44th, race says 10th, Djokovic says very good problem, while WTA accounts amplify her images alongside award winners, and 6 ranked peers stop tournament weeks to write beautiful in 5 different languages in the same comment section. The Mertens match April 24th is where tension between all those numbers gets resolved, the only way it actually can, not by ceremonies, gowns, captions, comment sections, or broadcast segments, but by 60 minutes of red clay at Madrid altitude, where gaps between system measurements and actual happenings either close or don't. What Cibeles Palace confirmed is stories have chapters red carpets cannot contain, the next already scheduled, so the question isn't whether you know her name, but whether you watched closely enough to understand what race numbers were revealing, when rankings said something completely different. Because people paying attention before gown arrivals already know that answer, and clay season is about to show everyone else.